Well, Nick, we learned that EJ Barthel has been extended. There were rumors flying about some flirtation and some other suitors for his services elsewhere, particularly in the Lone Star State. But Barthel coming back, and that prompts the discussion for today on this running back room for Nebraska, because it seems like it has been quite a while since you have had a reliable back for Nebraska football, and not just played a good game here or played a good game there, but someone that you went into the season going, no, that is the guy.
Yeah.
And you had Dana Holgorsen come in at the end of last year, now the full-time offensive coordinator, and say that he had to go into the running back room and tell the guys, just go hit the hole. And so those types of things where you had an outside voice come in, your running back room has not changed because of who the leadership is in that room. What do you take from the Barthel expansion and what that means for the running back room in 2025?
Well, I think first and foremost, for a head coach who has shown that he is willing to make necessary changes if he feels that they are warranted, for him to really go all in on EJ Barthel, especially when he was being courted by other schools like a Texas, I think that tells you that Matt Rule truly does believe there's something there. And this is the other thing we know about Matt Rule. I don't think that he is someone that is going to stand in the way if there is another opportunity for a coach, especially if he thinks that he can, bring in someone just as good, if not better. So I go with the head coach's feelings on this one, because I think he, in his short time here, has shown that he will make those changes, or he will let someone walk if that is their desire. For me, the jury is still out on EJ Barthel. A lot of the reasons you bring up right there, I think that there is something to be said about Emmett Johnson before EJ Barthel got here and Emmett Johnson now. And to me, that's an example of where I think a guy moving in the right direction, considering where he was, or at least where he seemed to be with the previous staff. That's one that I think, okay, maybe there's some positive development there. Never really knew exactly what happened with A.J. Allen, but remember, he was he didn't make it past spring
Right.
for the first year. And that was a guy that I know we were all very excited about. I mean, heck, even obviously he was a highly sought after player when he goes to Miami and gets all of those nice NIL perks as well. But it's been a mixed bag. And here's the other thing I'll bring up, Caleb. The rotation of running backs. I don't know about you, but throughout last year, I was scratching my head a lot saying, doesn't it make more sense for Emmett to get carries in this game? Or doesn't it make more sense for Ramir to get carries in this game? Who is the lead back? Do they need a lead back? And some of that, I want to be perfectly fair too in this criticism, or at least questioning. That also, I'm sure, had something to possibly do with Marcus Satterfield in collaboration, and even Donovan Raiola, when you're being the run game coordinator. So I don't want to put all of that on EJ Barthel, but a lot of it was confusing. And I felt like when Dana Holgorsen got in there, now at some point there were limited bodies as far as 100% too. So you were kind of riding with certain guys, but I felt like it made more sense of who you were going to roll with. And it just seemed like, okay, yeah, this makes more sense to me as far as who they're using. So I know first and foremost, EJ Barthel is going to be tasked with developing that running back room. But when it came to the rotation of these guys, because they didn't have that lead alpha, this is going to be your 20 to 25 carry guy, which I still thought could possibly be Emmett Johnson. It doesn't make it easy to assess the 2 short years that he has been at Nebraska and how that room collectively is, what the overall health of that room is right now. I think we've seen great things out of Emmett Johnson, at times not so much. I think we've seen good things. We saw good things out of Ramir. I mean, we'll never forget the Pinstripe Bowl performance. So some of that can be chalked up with what he's able to do from a developmental standpoint and being able to connect with them. But again, if there's one question or criticism that I have about it, is you haven't developed that elite running back yet. Maybe they just haven't had it. And then secondly, you have not made a lot of sense when it comes to how you want to rotate them. And again, maybe that's a collaborative effort between Satterfield and Raiola, but there's still some, I guess what I'm getting at is I still have questions about his overall effectiveness with this running back room.
That's a good point, because I want to know what is, maybe it's not blame, but where is the percentage of the way things have gone? Who do you point to? Because the offensive line looked better last year. I know you had a freshman quarterback, and there were times that the passing game wasn't going, so you could key in on a running game that wasn't necessarily effective. You would milk carton guys, and that's multiple staffs. That someone would go in and something would maybe go wrong, and then you wouldn't see them, and you're like, okay, well, that's a little bit of accountability and a little bit of who do you have that's actually playing well. And we saw with Dana Holgorsen right away, Thomas Fidone with a false start, and then you just didn't see him like in one of those regular season games. So I think there's still going to be the accountability part that you might milk carton a guy because of what you have early on, but don't do that to where it's detrimental to your offense.
Right.
And you should get a big jump from Emmett Johnson, because I thought he played a lot better once you got to Dana Holgorsen's offense.
Agreed.
And that's a strange thing to say, in that when you just look at the history of Dana Holgorsen and you go, yeah, throw the ball all around the yard, but he's had some pretty good running backs. And that's a big part when you think Oregon and, okay, they're going to spread the ball all over the place. Well, it helps a lot when you got a guy like Jordan James in your backfield, those are the types of things that help with these offenses. And I think Emmett Johnson is definitely going to be one of those guys. We've been waiting to see the emergence of Quentin Ives. And hopefully now that you've thinned out some of the upperclassmen, there's the opportunity there. But you also have Kenneth Williams in there. You've got a couple of good freshmen coming in that I don't expect to see the field right away. But someone's going to have to rise to the top. And if it is Connor Booth, if it is Jamarian Parker, and they're true freshmen, well, guess what? That's where we are in college football with 105 roster limits, and you never know if someone's coming back next year. I think this is now an opportunity where you might say you're not redshirting at a skill position like this in a different way than you would have a couple years ago.
Well, and the guy that I think, again, I don't want to sound the alarm bells off, but the guy that I know all of us were excited about that Nebraska got when Dante Dowdell decided to transfer from Oregon to Nebraska, he looked like he had the making of, okay, this is our 3-down back right here.
He broke a man's arm.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? There were games, and I'll give this staff and Dante credit himself. There were games where it made sense. Colorado game, Dante Dowdell getting the ball when he did, and the way that he ran, and he ran violently. It's exactly what that game needed. But I felt like there were too many games in between the Colorado game and really the back end of the season, maybe the last 2 or 3 games of the season, where a lot of the guys being used, and it wasn't necessarily because, well, we're using him because the other guys aren't available because they're dinged up. When you had a healthy backfield for the most part, there were so many times like, okay, why aren't we seeing more Emmett? And then there were times like, okay, I know Dante Dowdell fumbled, but at some point, he gives you the best opportunity in between the tackles. And, Ramir Johnson out of the backfield as both not only as a running back, but also as a receiver as well. Like, who's pass blocking better against this pass rush? Why? So there was just always questions that I never felt were completely answered. So I go back to the development, and you bring up a guy like Quentin Ives and then some of the incoming freshmen. This is going to be a true test for the next couple of years to see the type of jumps that one guy can make from freshman to sophomore year and other guys make right out of the gate as a freshman getting into the latter half if they are used indeed in the backfield, because you got to be better in running the football consistently. This is what Matt Rule still wants to do. And the Dana Holgorsen offense, everyone thinks, well, it's going to be 90% throwing the football and 10% run. No, that's not the case. He wants concepts of running the football, especially in the Big Ten. So that area has to be better. I'm still in wait and see mode. I have more questions. I have more questions than answers with just the whole running back room operation.
And because of the roster limit, you can only afford to have so many of that position on your roster.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point.
You have to get some hits from these guys. And you started out last year and you looked at the depth chart, And as I called it in a story for Husker Max, the 4 oarsmen, because everyone had an oar next to their name in the running back part of it, and you didn't know game to game who was going to be that guy.
Oh, Caleb, that's the gamesmanship by the coaching staff. Come on.
It could be that, or on the one hand, you don't know the way the coaching staff is going to call a certain game, and you don't know who's going to get the runs. On the other, none of those guys necessarily separated themselves for large portions of the season. There's that where you were right. Shouldn't we have been getting more Emmett Johnson here? Well, Dante Dowdell's not playing bad. Well, we've seen what a healthy Ramir Johnson looks like. Well, also he's kind of a little bit banged up, and you're not playing in the Bronx right now. So you go through all of these guys, and there was a reason to not play them just as much as there was a reason to play them. When do you get to a running back where you go, yeah, he's that guy. He separated himself. And I don't think you've necessarily had that since maybe Dedrick Mills in 2020 in a COVID-shortened season and what he was able to ultimately do end of the season against Rutgers. But you haven't had a guy year in and year out that you go, he is the heir to that running back room in the way that, you know what, you had a decade plus ago. And you can go back to what the 90s were, but you don't have to go that far to get to Rex Burkhead and Amir Abdullah and a whole bunch of guys that it was just like, no, they were the guy in the backfield, regardless of down, regardless of who else was on the roster.
Yeah, and that position, I think, right now is very interesting for this. You bring up a great point about the new roster limitation too, because of how much more emphasis has to be on the quick development path for these guys, because you can't just start picking down the roster of 120 or 125 and finding that walk-on running back, because that's just not going to exist anymore. And, I think the running back position itself in college football, and we're even seeing it in the NFL, has evolved to the point that shelf life can be longer because of the rotation, but it doesn't take away the importance of being able to still have that reliable running back one, and then still being able to utilize a little bit, maybe more of the Swiss Army knife running back that can help you both in the passing game and the running game, but also the change of pace guy. I don't think that part of it has changed at all. So as much as maybe the shelf life, because there's going to be a little bit more tread on the tires when these guys get out of college, because maybe their game reps are down a little bit, because you do want to use a secondary back a lot more than what we saw, decades ago. Still does have the effectiveness, I think, now with that 105 limit, that you've got to find these guys, you've got to identify them, and you've got to say, okay, this is our 20 to 25 carry a game type of person. That part of it has not gone away. So I think, again, going back to EJ Barthel, can he identify? Well, first of all, can they identify one or two guys they think will fit that mold, and then can they develop them to get there to where we're seeing that on Saturdays?
And hopefully we'll learn a bit more throughout this spring without a spring game, but hopefully we still get to see a little bit of practice and all of that.